Everything's bigger in Texas, including voter purges. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
Paige, your home state of Texas, they do everything bad bigger. Like if there's a bad policy idea, particularly around democracy, that they can do bigger than anybody else, you can count on Texas for that.
You know, second biggest state by population and by land, we got to make our splash somehow, and they've chosen to do that through voter suppression. The latest edition of this was on Monday when Governor Greg Abbott announced that Texas has purged over 1 million voters from the state's voter rolls since September of 2021. That sounds like a lot, Marc, 1 million voters, but here's the breakdown that Greg Abbott offers. Over 6,500 of those voters were non-citizens. Over 6,000 were voters who have a felony conviction. Over 457,000 were deceased voters. 463,000 voters on the suspense list. Over 134,000 voters who responded to an address confirmation saying that they had moved. Over 65,000 voters who failed to respond to a notice of examination. And over 19,000 voters who requested that their registrations be canceled.
Paige, you know, he made a point of saying that this is ever since he signed SB 1, which was the big voter suppression law that Texas passed in 2021, but actually has nothing to do with this. Like, SB 1 did a lot of terrible things. You may remember the Democratic legislature walked out because it made voting harder. It really targeted almost every aspect of voting in the state and really crippled the ability of Texans to be able to register and vote. So it was a bad bill, but it didn't really have anything to do with the purges that he is oddly claiming credit for. And in most states, Paige, the governor would issue a proclamation saying the good things they're doing. Here, he waited 3 years to compile enough of these to get to 1 million. So that he could announce that he crossed 1 million. And I have to wonder, is this because he's like jealous of some of the other states that like have been leading on the terrible voter purge front, in 2024? Frank LaRose from Ohio embarrassed him by Frank LaRose purging so many voters that Greg Abbott woke up and said, hey, everyone, let's do our own announcement.
It's funny you say that because we're talking on the Democracy Docket team about how it feels like we don't talk about Texas as much anymore. We talk a lot more about Pennsylvania and Ohio. Maybe that's because they're more swing states in a presidential election year. But Greg Abbott wanted to make his mark. He wanted you to know that he has overseen over 1 million voters getting purged from the rolls. But Marc, as you said, it was 1 million voters over 3 years. Texas is a huge state. It has 30 million residents. Its voter rolls are up to almost 18 million voters. So maybe removing, 330,000 voters a year sounds pretty on par for just regular list maintenance. It doesn't seem like a big voter purge, but Greg Abbott wants you to think that it is.
120,000 of these are either deceased voters or voters on the suspense list. I mean, he is clearly suffering from a form of jealousy that other Republican states have captured more of the limelight. And he wants, because the legislature doesn't meet every full time in Texas, right? So he probably can't even pass a new voter suppression law.
Right. And Marc, people may be really confused watching this video, right? They clicked on this video because we said that Texas has canceled over 1 million voter registrations. They're used to us talking about what terrible things Texas is doing for voters. And right now we're sitting here and being like, Greg Abbott is making this seem like it's worse than it is. It just sounds like regular list maintenance. So remind everyone what states do on a regular basis to ensure that their voter rolls are accurate, and why this announcement from Greg Abbott may just be a part of that.
Look, first of all, if Texas had just stayed in Eric, this probably would have saved a lot of hoopla and taxpayer money for the state, although maybe this is the whole point. But Eric, if you don't remember, is the intrastate compact between states that said that when you have information on voting, you will share it with the other states. So if someone moved out of Texas to, say, Kansas would tell Texas, this person now lives in Kansas, remove them from the rolls. But that's the kind of thing that is routine list maintenance. When people die, the death records get reported to the election agencies for removal. As I mentioned, when people move out of state, they should get reported if Texas bothers to get that information from other states. I mean, the most of the stuff here is extremely routine. But the fact that he wants to put out a press release on this, rather than, for example, how many people they registered to vote, which is also a really large number, tells you something about that.
Right. And we have those numbers from the Secretary of State's office. So in November of 2021, shortly after SB1 was signed, Texas reported 16.9 million voters. In February of 2024, the state reported 17.9 million voters. So if Texas has removed 1 million voters in that time and the voter rolls still went up 1 million voters in that time, we're talking about 2 million voters getting added to the rolls. Yet that's not what Greg Abbott chose to talk about. He didn't choose to talk about the new voters. He chose to talk about the voters that were kicked off.
And this is the tragedy of our democracy today. Because here you have a Republican governor of one of the fastest growing states in the country, one of the most diverse electorates in the country, who is celebrating the fact that they have removed 1 million people and not celebrating how many people they have added to the rolls. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why wouldn't Greg Abbott want to celebrate the good news, which is the growth of Texas, the growing expanded electorate in Texas? And the answer is because the voters who are registering in Texas are not his voters. They are younger than the average voter in Texas. They are more likely to be Hispanic and Latino than the average voter in Texas. They are likely as a whole to be diverse voters or minority voters rather than white voters. And this is the tragedy of the Republican Party of Texas, and we've seen this in redistricting, where, for the last 2 cycles, you have seen the addition of congressional districts in Texas, and almost entirely based on the growth of the Latino population. Yet you have Republicans who continue to gerrymander and gerrymander and gerrymander. And so now in 2024, they find themselves with a very, very close Senate election in which Ted Cruz may very well lose to Colin Allred, a football hero from Baylor, who went on to play in the NFL and then became a lawyer and served in the Obama administration. Big fan of his. But Ted Cruz may lose to him. The presidential race looks much closer than most people think it would in Texas, and it's all because of the kind of Republicans like Ken Paxton, like Greg Abbott, who are fighting against democracy rather than trying to persuade this emerging new electorate to support them. And it's because their policies suck. That's why. Paige, as I said in the intro, everything is bigger in Texas. Well, guess what? The discounts are bigger on Democracy Docket because we have crossed 150,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So thank you, each and every one of you, for watching this video. And if you have not already, please subscribe. And if you are already subscribed, thank you again. As a special promotion for this milestone, we have created a code for our merch store. The link is in the show notes below. Use the code DDYT10 for 10% off on your next checkout.
Marc, you mentioned Ken Paxton, who is, a noted vote suppressor, all around bad guy. He time and time again has proven that he is no friend to democracy. He's honestly not a friend to the people of the state of Texas. And now we have the news that his office is raiding the homes of Latino civil rights activists in the state.
Yeah, and as you say, in the pantheon of despicable people, I mean, Texas has got a lot in the running. I mean, you've got Ted Cruz, who, might be the most despised member of the United States Senate. You've got Greg Abbott, who could be the worst governor in the state. But I have to say, pound for pound, the worst statewide elected official in the state of Texas is definitely Ken Paxton, the attorney general, who, as you point out, is no friend of democracy, and whose office launched these raids against civil rights workers and volunteers and activists who are doing nothing wrong. They are simply trying to register people to vote. I mean, one of them, according to news reports, was an 87-year-old woman who, who has been registering people to vote. And that is who they are targeting in the state of Texas. That is how Ken Paxton is running his office in the state of Texas. It is an absolute disgrace. It should be a national scandal on the front page of every news outlet right now. What is happening in the state of Texas between Greg Abbott's announcement and taking pride in, as you say, what is likely a lot of routine maintenance, but he wants to seem like he is purging voters. And then you have Ken Paxton actually engaged in activity that should shock any decent person's conscience, that 70 days or so before an election, this is how the AG is conducting itself. This is how they are spending taxpayer money in Texas. It gets me mad every time I think about it. And look, this is just the latest episode in a series of episodes of bad voter suppression in the state of Texas. Paige and I have covered this in numerous videos before, and on the website of Democracy Docket, you'll find lots of content. Please make sure you're subscribed to their free daily and weekly newsletters. We'll see you next time.